Yo, welcome back to Sister Punk Studios. I'm Keisha, and like and subscribe if you like my anime reviews, my New York City vlogs, or my music with my band Cryo Child for my punk family. For this video, I'm getting into a hype new shonen anime, Jujutsu Kaisen. This supernatural, action-filled season has been setting the bar at a new height, with some of the best animation and character design that we've seen from MAPPA Studios, but with an edgier but simultaneously upbeat and modern kind of vibe that is undeniably familiar and definitely inspired from previous powerhouse shonen anime series. Jujutsu Kaisen follows Yuji Itadori, a teenager in urban Japan. After a series of unfortunate events, like being possessed by one of the most powerful cursed spirits of all time, Yuji exchanges his life in order to enter a sorcerer's academy, in order to build his exorcist skills, alongside his other magically enhanced peers like Megumi Nobara and his mischievous sensei Gojo Satoru. Yuji must consume and destroy the remaining body parts of the villainous embodied curse known as Sukuna, that also resides inside Yuji, fueling his tremendous fighting abilities. And Sukuna is just waiting for the chance to regain his strength and resume his bodily autonomy, in order to unleash his bloody, gruesome, sadistically murderous and sexy, wait no, not sexy, horrible horror. Y'all didn't hear me say that. But I can't help but notice that Jujutsu Kaisen has a heavy reference to the iconic anime staple, Naruto. And it might sound far-fetched, but hold on, hear me out. This comparison has actually been made a couple of times, with new reviews analyzing some of the inspiration in this new generation of shonen series. Naruto also follows this happy-go-lucky kid training in ninja school instead of a sorcerer school. But he is also possessed with a nine-tailed fox spirit with the power to destroy the ninja world. And this spirit was sealed in Naruto's body and forced him to live as an outcasted orphan in his village, until Naruto begins his ninja training and joins his teammates Sasuke, Sakura, and the incredibly skilled Kakashi Sensei. And from there, Naruto begins his journey to become the leader of his village, the Hokage. Can I get a believe it? Believe it! Okay. His Ninja Team 7 completes missions as a task force, bodyguards, or even assassins. But Naruto's nine-tailed fox energy tempts the most insanely powerful ninjas, who want to capture all of the nine-tailed beasts and cast a potentially apocalyptic ninjutsu with the power to control all of humanity. This is definitely gonna be a little nostalgic run to Naruto's anime series, but admittedly it has about 700 more episodes than Jujutsu Kaisen. And yeah, sometimes it can feel like the Naruto fan base explosion is still fresh out of high school. But Naruto's anime actually started airing in 2002 in Japan, and the English dub was only released in 2005 on Cartoon Network. That's about 15 years ago, and definitely considered a vintage by this generation's standards. But Naruto is just dated enough to inspire a new rendition. And I might dare say that Jujutsu Kaisen is a better paced and animated, more mature and detailed version of Naruto. But what better way to find out than with an anime matchup? And I'm gonna compare the personalities, backstories, and strength of the MCs of Jujutsu Kaisen and Naruto. That's Yuji Itadori with Naruto Uzumaki, Megumi and Sasuke, Nobara and Sakura, and Gojo versus Kakashi. Let's start out with our main characters, Yuji and Naruto. Both of these guys have persistently cheerful and optimistic attitudes, sometimes even in the worst of times. From their brightly colored hair, boisterous attitudes, and mischievous charisma. But I'd say Yuji has a more tempered nature and is definitely way more likable and way less annoying than Kid Naruto. Honestly, Yuji's character reminds me of a more innocent, less delinquent version of Ichigo from Bleach. And he has this more thoughtful, mature nature that Naruto doesn't really develop until later in his teens in the more dramatic scenes of Naruto Shippuden. And I guess that maturity comes from life and death situations being so much more real and emotionally potent from the jump in Jujutsu Kaisen. In the opening episode of Jujutsu Kaisen, we follow Yuji to visit his grandfather in the hospital, who's pretty much already on his deathbed. And his grandfather's last words tells Yuji to simply be good to others and help them out, and to die a good death. And hours later, Yuji is now eating a nasty-ass cursed finger in order to save Megumi from evil curses. Even though Megumi Megumi is just some random guy he just met at this point, Yuji is determined to keep his grandfather's promise. Yuji is naive, thoughtful, and kind of adorable, all while being possessed by an ancient evil spirit. But an interesting contrast to Naruto's possession is that Yuji chose this life, and Naruto doesn't really experience a significant death in his life until like episode 80 of the series, when the third Hokage, who was supposed to be raising him, dies fighting off an attack on the village. And the nine-tailed fox wasn't really sealed inside Naruto by his choice. It was his parents' last sacrifice in order to protect the village from the demon's rage. But it also seals Naruto's fate that he doesn't even really get to confront and control until episode 200-something in the sequel. But we'll get more into these guys' demons later on in the video. Next, we have Megumi and Sasuke, two birds of a feather and casual rivals of the main character. Megumi is practically a mirror of teenage Sasuke, with his dark hair and attire, stoic, brooding, and intimidating nature, and ever secretive, most likely coming from a family of powerful abilities. But I don't know, Megumi is almost too secretive that like I don't have enough information on him to properly compare him to Sasuke, who ends up having the most brutally epic bloodline. But I definitely say that Megumi's personality is way less of a sore sport than Sasuke, and Megumi seems to compete more with his own potential than with Yuji, who he frankly thinks is an overpowered idiot. But Megumi is definitely way more pleasant than the ever-brooding tryhard Sasuke Uchiha, who lets his bond with Naruto as his rival and even as his friend become tainted. And Sasuke is led astray by his own aimless desires for revenge against those who killed his family and his entire clan. I can only hope that Megumi's desire for power doesn't tear apart his sanity and drive him away from his friends. Being a Jujutsu sorcerer is hard, and it can be tempting not to want to remember the names of the people who you fight alongside with, who very much may die. But really, that's all the more reason why these connections are important, and it keeps Megumi tethered to the experiences that he shares with Itadori and Nobara instead of pushing them away like Sasuke did. And speaking of that sassy devil witch Nobara, let's get into our comparison with the most hated and debated Sakura. Granted, there have been a lot more defenders of Sakura's development throughout Naruto, but Sakura's character remains under constant scrutiny. There are, of course, the misogynistic debates of whether or not her character is bad because she's just a girl in a male-centered shonen anime, and more valid arguments that Sakura was written poorly because she was created by a male shonen author, who really only inserted her character to form a love triangle between Naruto and Sasuke. But Sakura still gets her flowers for being a feminine character that is strong and dedicated. But so much of her skill is watered down to being a healer, a role that every female character in every adventure ever has been reduced to. Or in the worst case, she's a token damsel in distress, which is always portrayed as a burden on the team. And even her best battles are often overshadowed by the more experienced members of the ninja teams. But I could forgive all of that if she wasn't such a from her insanely obsessive crush for Sasuke, who ignores her every advance, to the horrible way that she treats Naruto, who likes her for some reason. Of course, she's not obligated at all to reciprocate Naruto's feelings, but she really thinks that she's straight up better than him and takes every chance to abuse and degrade him. And that tsundere, semi-abusive female trope got old with me fast. But at the same time, when Nobara does it,
you drop even one of those bags, and I'll kill you!
Oh, right. Oh.
She just hits different. Okay, I'm playing. But for real, I can see why Nobara was a breath of fresh air and badass representation of female characters in shonen anime. She's not just selfish, she's prideful. Nobara has her own goals, her own experiences, her own sense of worth that doesn't depend on her peers' recognition. Her emotions are so bold and complex, and she's so straightforward with the way that she interacts with her other classmates. And even though she's confident, she knows where she comes from, and begins to learn the right time to humble herself in order to save lives. and went to make a vicious sacrifice in order to savor sweet victory. Nobara isn't part of a freaking love triangle. She's just as much of a rival as Yuji and Megumi, and she's one of many dynamically developed female characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. Alright, let's finally get into the spark that keeps these crews together. I'm talking about our white-haired, blindfolded, secretly overpowered, cunning, and loving teachers, Gojo Satoru and Kakashi Sensei. You can't look at these characters and tell me that they aren't dastardly copies of each other's character designs and concept. Gojo and Kakashi are elite fighters as sorcerers and ninjas, with world-crushing, mind-bending abilities, hidden only by the dark sashes that they wear across their eyes. And even though their powers are intimidating, both of these suave masterminds have a soft spot for their students, in order to bring out their best in even the most torturous challenges. But Gojo and Kakashi fall short of being actual paternal figures because they allow the freedom for these kids to figure it out on their own, while balancing out the foreshadowing internal conflicts of their organizations. I'd still say that Gojo is way more erratic, flamboyant, and unpredictable than Kakashi, who is more laid back and aloof. But I think both of these characters put on this more approachable mask in order to hide their insane power, as well as the complicated paths that led them to adulthood. And what's more is that Gojo and Kakashi are so protective of the main characters, and are keenly aware of the magnitude of strength from these curses and spirits that they're somehow keeping in check inside of these tumultuous teens. And speaking of these devils, let's get into the big bad evil guys that drive our character and plot progressions. And these beasts are at times an antagonist, and sometimes they're a secret weapon. The nine-tailed fox from Naruto, and Sukuna, the cursed spirit from Jujutsu Kaisen. Sukuna is straight up personified evil, wrapped in a seductively tattooed, four-armed cursed demon. And he appears when he's possessed our main character Yuji, and is also a patient spectator in his subconscious. Our team's main mission is to find the scattered parts of Sukuna's body that when consumed can grant their host tremendous power, or turn them into a new possessed vessel, in order for Sukuna to reincarnate and wreak havoc once again. Sukuna is selfish, cold-hearted, immoral, and exceptionally sadistic. And the only thing keeping his incredible rage at bay is Yuji being that guy. Somehow, by sheer innocence, self-awareness, I don't know, but Yuji is able to keep himself from being completely possessed by Sukuna. And this proves to be very dangerous, even though it's convenient, because Sukuna can do a lot of damage in the few moments that he is released. And Yuji has to learn to not be so dependent on his cursed abilities and develop his own techniques. But Sukuna is still waiting, and he's very aware that Yuji is practically delivering him more pieces of his body. And even though this is in order to consume and in the future destroy Sukuna, it actually slowly makes him more powerful. And this exchange of power is way more complex as we learn the potential that can come with experimenting with this level of destruction. Even if the intent is to save humanity, Yuji takes on a huge responsibility. And I can't help but compare this to the nine-tailed fox demon that was sealed inside of Naruto in order to protect civilization's destruction. But it ultimately made Naruto an exile and a powder keg of raw emotion and power. And honestly, if Naruto wasn't such a sweet kid, I can imagine him going rogue just like Sasuke. But besides that, it's actually a long journey before we begin to personify the nine-tailed fox that resides inside of Naruto. At some point, he stops being this reckless force of nature and becomes a conscious spirit that has more complexity and longevity to his identity than just rage. But the Nine-Tails' power can also be manipulated to potentially destroy the ninja world once again. But it's a little bit more hopeful in this situation because Naruto is actually able to befriend Kyubey and combine their strength. And also, like Yuji, Naruto has to learn not to depend on the immense power of the spirit he contains and learn to develop his own unique abilities. And I highly doubt that Yuji and Sukuna will ever be such good friends as Naruto and the Nine-Tailed Fox. But I'm sure at some point Yuji and Sukuna will be able to make a deal that either can't refuse. In my opinion, there is so much potential in Jujutsu Kaisen because it's able to move forward from the foundation set in its genre by mega franchises like Naruto. But it's also able to evolve with the audiences that love these anime action adventures and the world that's changed around us. This generation is so much more critical and self-conscious, but these characters characters, much like older fans of anime, are more mature and nuanced, and their personalities and backstories. And this muddles the boundaries between good and evil, while our characters create their own values and bonds, even if they mirror those same connections and the kind of prototype series like Naruto. But I can't even say just yet if Jujutsu Kaisen will be a greater masterpiece than Naruto, even though I'm so critical of it, because there is so much more story to discover in Jujutsu Kaisen, even though it's had an amazing impact and hype. But hey, stay tuned for my next take on Jujutsu Kaisen as the main character's journey progresses and maybe can stand on its own legacy. Let me know what you think about this new generation of anime in comparison to the classic series that they were inspired by in the comments down below. If you like my reviews, check out my anime playlist and like and subscribe. You can follow me on all my socials, links in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.